Hi, I'm Scott Wegener, and this is Travel Chapters with TripAdvisor. Each episode, we explore the stories, insights, and real-world trends shaping how the world travels. From shifting behaviour to destination innovation, we look at where data meets experience and what it means for the people who bring travel to life. Let's jump in. Today we're recording in Brisbane, Australia, and I'm joined by the founder and CEO of Flight Centre Travel Group, Graham Skroo Turner. He's the Aussie boy who went to work in London as a vet, but saw an opportunity and co-founded Top Deck Tours, a double-decker bus trip out of London to Europe and North Africa. It was a scrappy but high-growth touring business that ultimately led him back to Australia, where he launched Flight Centre in 1982, taking everything he'd learned and rebuilding it as a network of shopfront travel agencies. Flight Centre has since evolved from a traditional shopfront network into a genuinely multi-channel business that combines retail outlets, human consultants, sophisticated digital platforms, and a large corporate travel division spanning 23 businesses, 100 countries, more than $24 billion in annual transaction value, and 500 plus retail stores. And Skroo has always been at the helm. Across more than 4 decades, he's steered the business through wars, global financial crisis, the rise of online travel agencies, and the COVID shutdowns, transforming a small challenger brand into a listed travel giant, employing over 12,000 people worldwide. The man is a legend in the industry, and I'm so excited to sit down with him today to talk all things travel. Skroo, thanks for joining us on Travel Chapters with TripAdvisor. Now, I do understand if you're somewhat distracted today, as we have this live situation in the Middle East, which is obviously unfolding. Obviously, our thoughts are with civilians caught up in that situation. And I don't want to detract from that, but there obviously are implications for travellers and for travel businesses right now. And so I'm just wondering, like from a Flight Centre perspective, can you take us inside your offices and maybe your leadership meetings in terms of giving us an insight into the impact this is having and kind of where you're prioritising your efforts right now?
Okay, yeah, well, thanks, Scott. Look, I know we've got a few thousand people affected actually in the Middle East at the moment, but generally at the moment, obviously people are being looked after. They're in hotels. The UAE government apparently is funding that at the moment, and we're keeping in close touch with, the 3 major carriers there that giving us an update every 4 or 5 hours, and it does look like reasonably confident things will start flying again fairly soon. And our people, like it's obviously they're talking to a lot of people, they're rerouting people that they can. You will have heard the fares through Asia now to Europe have increased dramatically.
Didn't take long.
So it's a pretty fluid situation, but it's one of those things that hopefully it'll be mainly resolved within a few days or a week at the latest. But with what's happening there, we just don't know that at the moment. Yeah. But it's certainly, my leadership team's full on since the weekend, and hopefully it'll be reasonably good news within a week or two.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, it's interesting. I've mentioned in my introduction that you've been in the travel industry now for 50 odd years, and you've seen a lot of crises during that time. I suppose I'm really interested to understand whether, with having been through so many different things over the years, does it kind of prepare you when things like this come out of the blue? Like, is it possible to have a playbook for situations like this, or they're just all so unique that it's impossible?
Yeah, everything is unique. I think you do get used to it to a certain extent, and particularly when you've got an experienced leadership team, the main thing is, I guess, not to panic and just to look at it as to work through things to see what you can do and what you can't do. The interesting thing was, we started Top Deck in 1973, and Bill James and I took the first overland across from London to Kathmandu in 1975 in our old double-deckers, and it was really interesting at the time because the Shah was still in power then, and the people in Iran weren't very friendly to Westerners like us.
Right.
So we were quite happy to get out of Iran into Afghanistan, and where the people were amazingly friendly, and it was such an interesting place. But of course, the 4 years later, when the Shah was overthrown in '79, I think we had 12 buses caught up in Iran,
Wow.
just north of Tehran at the time. So sort of bit of history repeating itself in a way.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I am interested to go back and get an understanding of what ignited your passion for travel, because doing a bit of research on you, prior to this discussion, it kind of sounds like as soon as you finished uni, and correct me if I'm wrong, as soon as you finished uni, that was it, you were off. You went to London to work as a vet, but it didn't take long before you decided to start Top Deck, which obviously was a travel business, and since then it's all been about travel. So are you able to kind of take us back in terms of, like, what was it about travel that really resonated with you and made you want to leave Australia, travel all the way over to London and kind of work in the travel business for the rest of your life?
Yeah, a good question. And I think going back into the 60s and 70s in Australia here, I think most of us thought life was pretty boring here. I grew up on an apple orchard about 10 miles west of Stanthorpe on the Texas Road, and it was pretty boring. Went to one teacher school for 8 years. So when we went to university, and a group of us decided that, quite a big group, that we'd end up at the Munich Olympics in 1972. Obviously I only graduated late 71, so didn't have much time to save money to get over there. But we did that. We went and travelled around camper vans, which we did a tour or two, went to the beer fest, and just decided that we really enjoyed this. I know when I was probably 22, 23 then, and it was great fun. You could get away with just about anything.
As an Aussie overseas, yeah.
Well, there weren't many rules, or not rules that were enforced. So, that's when we decided, well, why don't we, we've seen these bus tours. There were quite a few different sorts of, mainly coach camping. And we thought a fitted out double-decker would be a bit more fun.
Yep. But I suppose your original intent when you went over there wasn't necessarily to start a business, but that's what happened. So then you leave, you come back to Australia. I mean, I know I'm glossing over a lot of stuff that happened in the meantime, but you come back to Australia and found Flight Centre in 1982. I'm again, like you did with Top Deck, I'm interested in understanding, what did you see in the travel industry at that time that others didn't see?
Top Deck was an interesting thing because we started off with one bus. By the time we did that overland trip in 75, I think we had 3 or 4 buses. And when I got back from the overland, I flew back from Kathmandu, and Bill and a couple of other guys brought the bus back. And I remember getting back to our little office in Dawes Road, and up till now it had just been a fun pastime. And we had an accountant who was a school friend of mine who was doing our books a bit. They were in pretty bad shape, but he said, you should think about this as a business, because you've got 4 or 5 buses. We're starting to make some money, and really this is a business, and we should be taking it seriously, or you should be. And so that was the start of that, and so it was almost coincidental.
Yeah.
The Flight Centre was a bit different. In London, when I came back, I think my son Matt was born about 81. So we used to come back most years. We were married, I think, 76, late 76, I think. So that's our 50th coming up soon too. Coming in London, we knew people. One person in particular, Dave Tonkin, who used to work for Top Deck there, but he worked for this outfit called the Flight Shop, and they were what they call a bucket shop in London. Very successful in Kensington Church Road, I think it was. And it was sort of illegal to discount airfares then. It certainly wasn't Australia, but even in the UK, you were meant to be members of ABTA and ATOL and this sort of thing. It's still the case there, actually. But the airlines had excess seats, and they couldn't. Some of them weren't the same quality as others, so they couldn't all charge the same amount of money, which is what they were meant to do. So they'd sell their seats off at a discount to these bucket shops. And when I came back to Australia, then in 81, 82, we could see that the place was just crying out for this. It was illegal, and some travel agents did get prosecuted for discounting airfares. And I think it was a Tasmanian travel agent who was quite a well-known one. But we decided to take the risk, set up with Dave Tonkin, who was from the flight shop in London. He set up Sydney Flight Centre at the Prudential Arcade in, I think it was around March 82. And he was a very good operator, but I think he made $90,000 in the first full 12 months with just one or two other people with him.
Wow.
And I wish we could do that with every shop
now. Absolutely.
But so, immediately there was demand, and we were lucky that the government, there was some competition issues there then, and the government realised that they would have to stop making illegally, discounting airfares illegal. It just didn't make sense.
Oh, that's good.
So we were lucky.
Yeah. So who was it impacting? Like, why was it illegal? I'm just trying to work out who's...
Well, half the airlines are owned by the government. Like I think TAA and Qantas, obviously government-owned airlines then, and so that was protecting them.
Oh, okay.
And it was sort of like considered a bit of a public service post-war.
Yeah.
So it did go on far too long, of course, and the ACCC would have a fit if they saw anything like that happening these days.
Yeah. And so you start that, you've got your first store in Sydney. Can you remember how you were thinking about Flight Centre in terms of your vision for it? Did you have a grand vision of hundreds of stores, throughout Australia and then potential global expansion? Or at that stage, was it more of kind of a test more than anything to see if the concept worked, and you kind of played it pretty conservatively in terms of your aspirations?
Look, a bit of both. I mean, when we started Top Deck, as I said, we had 4 or 5 buses after a couple of years, and we ended up, I think, by 1980, 81, we had about 75 buses running around the place. So, and I was always, I always wanted to grow. I was never happy with, and of course that nearly sent us broke in the early 80s, because if we had a trip that was full, we'd keep selling it to get another trip, and we had to go and get another bus and fit it out in sometimes in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
And it was a bit the same with Flight Centre. I mean, early days I thought it was a really good concept, and I thought it'd go pretty well. And once we got going, I think in the first year we had 3 or 4 shops with partners, Jeff Harris and Bill James. And within a couple of years we had about 30 shops, a lot of old ex-Top Deck people who would have equity, generally somewhere between 20-25% equity, actual cash in the game.
Yep.
We just couldn't open enough shops. It got to the stage where by 1990, I think we had about 180 or 100 shops, but we also had about 50 or 60 different companies, because every time you opened a shop, if someone had equity in it, you'd need a separate company to do it. So
it's a fascinating evolution. I think it's very easy for people like me to kind of quickly just encapsulate 50 years into, a couple of questions and a couple of statements, but obviously you've been through, peaks and troughs over that time. There's probably been times where, it's been super stressful and you wondered if you were actually going to make it. But I suppose, to be able to sit here now and as you pointed out, like I worked for TripAdvisor, which was founded by, a gentleman by the name of Steve Kalfer. I worked for Virgin Australia previously, which was obviously founded, Brett Godfrey with the support of Richard Branson. But you when you can start something as a founder, as you have, and it has longevity and it grows to the scale that it has, you're impacting so many lives in a really positive way. So I think that must be really gratifying as well, as when you do reflect to kind of know that you've got a lot of these employees who have gone on and worked for Flight Centre for a long time and forged careers, maybe met their partners, had kids, all of that stuff, and you've been a part of that. So I'm interested in just discussing this. I mean, again, you've probably thought about this, talked about this many times, but for many years there's been this narrative that online platforms would replace traditional travel agents. Yet here you are today with over 500 retail outlets, 12,000 employees, roughly, is the last number I saw. Has there ever been a time over the 50 years where you've questioned the model, or where you've had internal pressures potentially, like, I don't know, board or senior leadership that have kind of been suggesting that we need to kind of move away from this model and just go full bore on online?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am reasonably well known for, I think it was about the year 2000, when I say, the internet's just a fad, won't last.
Is that on the record?
It is on the record, and my people keep reminding me of that. And we do have, as a model, just for example, pre-COVID, we had some over 1,500 actual bricks and mortar. We're back down to just under 600 now. We went down to 400, so had a huge change then. And some of it was probably an advantage that we did manage to rationalise certain things, but obviously it meant that coming back from COVID was a pretty tough gig. But generally, and of course we've got artificial intelligence and AI that is going to make a difference. It's a risk in some areas for sure, because what AI can do is it's breathtaking at times, and it's improving and advancing at such a rate that you just don't know what it's going to be like in a year's time. But it's also opportunities, because we can do a lot of enhancement of our customer experience, our workflows, by using this intelligently. And I think that's the big challenge at the moment, particularly for people as an intermediary. We still have some tour operations. We own Top Deck, and we own Backroads and Grasshopper Tours, and so a DMC based in Singapore called Discover, but a lot of our other business are intermediaries, and AI certainly will, in some areas, put us under some pressure there.
Just thinking about this topic, like I found it interesting that recently Luxury Escapes, an Australian online travel agency, has actually kind of bucked the trend, and they've started moving into physical spaces, which I think seems to validate that there is still a need for that kind of high trust, high touch level of service, particularly these days. Right? We'll touch on it hopefully a little later, but these days when people are really thinking about their trips more deeply in terms of the experiences and kind of what they want to experience and accomplish while they're on a trip. So that human element feels like it's probably even more important now than it has been for a long time.
Yeah, I think you'll see even the market that does like checking in, talking to an actual person, even though they might be quite literate, digitally literate, but are the 20 to 40-year-olds from all the surveys we've done. So there is certainly still a need for that, and I think with Luxury Escapes, with their couple of big bricks and mortar locations, probably have a few different motivations for that, but it's certainly, and there's no doubt with for example, our Flight Centre brand, that we consider the shop front not just a place where people can walk in, but it is a billboard as well. And I think people like to see that. It gives them encouragement that you're going to be around for a while, as well as the convenience of just walking in and talking to a person. So, so whether it's talking to a person in a head office, in a shop, in a local shop, or doing things online assisted by AI, there is no doubt. Our online booking in the flightcentre.com, for example, is going great guns at the moment. So, it's only taken us 25 years to get better at it. But so I think you do need to be multifaceted, and that's what people want. Some people just want to do everything themselves, and that won't change. Some people just like booking themselves on an airline website, even though if things, don't go, something happens, they'll tend to be on their own. But that's the risk they're quite happy to take because they like doing it.
I think it's fascinating what you said about that Gen Zs and millennials that you'd think would just be massively gravitating to just anything online, but they're actually the ones that we're seeing it too on TripAdvisor, that are very interested in kind of creating and curating a trip that's full of experiences, and they want a human to help them with that, which kind of goes against what the general perception is out there. So switching tack a little bit, loyalty. Flight Centre, like my perception is that because the brand, particularly in Australia, has been around for so long, you would just automatically have a degree of loyalty amongst, a number of Australians, which maybe gets passed down from generation to generation as well. But you have recently launched your own loyalty program. So I'm kind of interested in why now? Like, why did it take, if it's something obviously you want to do, why did it take so long? And kind of what's your vision for that? And how do you feel this is kind of different from an airline loyalty program or a hotel loyalty program, which kind of are, generally the loyalty programs that are most synonymous with travellers?
Yeah, we have had a previous experience, and I was probably more involved in the previous scheme than this one, and that was, I think, about 20 years ago, 2005, and we didn't put enough time, effort, and planning into it, and it wasn't. It was too expensive, and so I think we shut it down after about 6 months. But this is, and a lot of this comes down to James Kemsley, who actually James Kavanagh, who runs the leisure division globally, and it's been put together very professionally with people who really know what they're doing, and it will involve more than our Flight Centre brand, initially our other retail brands, but our other leisure brands, eventually our corporate brands as well. We've already got, I think, 250,000 members, but in Australia, we need probably a couple of million before it really has an impact. The main thing is that with our partners, and we have partners like Bupa and Caltex and a couple of the major banks and other people like that, you'll be able to redeem your points, your World 360 rewards points, on any sort of travel. And for example, if you book a Qantas flight, you'll get the points on that Qantas flight. You'll also get the Qantas points as well. So, and so if you pay with a credit card, you'll triple dip. So there's some big advantage of this, and our speciality that will set us apart is that you'll be able to redeem those points on any sort of travel, on any airline, and that makes us a little bit different from other schemes. And it's not going to be an overnight, runaway success, but certainly the indications are that it's going to be quite popular, and it'll take us 2 or 3 years to really build it up. But and particularly when we can start incorporating some of the other brands, we already have, I think, Cruiseabout and Travel Associates, but some of the corporate brands as well. I think it's going to be an important thing for us in the future.
Yeah, it sounds like you're maybe learnt a few of the lessons of the past and devoting a bit more, energy and resource to this one and making. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea that potentially you're going to be able to double dip, triple dip, and the ease of redemption. I joined up the other day, by the way, just because I was interested in finding out the process. But really interesting time for loyalty in general, and hopefully we can see that the success of that over the next few years. We've spoken a little bit about, you brought up AI, and I'm just interested in understanding a little bit, in a world that is increasingly shaped by AI, social media, algorithms, what role does human judgment and the human experience still play in the planning of travel? Like I've got my own opinions on that, but I'm really interested as someone that's, been in the industry for as long as you have, to get your perspective on this. This time right now is super interesting, but what's the role of the human experience in kind of planning travel?
I think people do like the idea of, some people like planning their trip, but then they like to get confirmation that what they're doing can't be altered a little bit. And the nuance you get from talking to a human who knows their stuff is a bit different. AI will certainly help if you ask the right questions. It'll certainly help you plan and get an itinerary. And I think it's one of the reasons why the younger people probably like that human input as well as their digital and AI input. And I think it's partly because they have a much broader wish list, if you like, of what they want to do, where they want to travel. When you get a bit older, and I put myself in that category, you have a pretty good idea what you want to do. And so AI will be able to help you a bit, but obviously people have had a fair bit of experience in travelling and they sort of know more or less what they want, whereas I think young people in their 20s and 30s probably are looking more at a whole broader range of what they might want to do, and that's a great thing for AI to give you suggestions, but running it past a human, I think still who's got experience and knowledge and expertise, is probably the reason that age groups likes that human interaction. But there's no doubt that within a relatively short period of time, people are going to be able to work with AI, book with AI, and do the transaction with AI. And most of the times it'll probably work out quite well.
Yeah. I think there's this recognition that it's like, okay, originally maybe it was like, oh my God, this is going to be so disruptive, everyone's going to lose their jobs, etc. And like, we don't know what the ultimate outcome will be. But I think there seems to be this general acceptance within our industry that, okay, we can leverage this technology to make the overall experience better. And I think the companies that manage to do that but still have that human element as well are going to be best off and hopefully best served. If you were starting Flight Centre today rather than 1982, what's the one thing you would do differently?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't really thought about this, but I think it depends on what age you are. I think if I was starting something like this now, I'd be really looking at the digital experience, probably much more specialised. When we started Flight Centre, it was very much a mass flight-based operation. Whereas I think now I would look at a much more specialised, whether that's in luxury or adventure or something like this, rather than mass flights. Partly because the earnings on flights, commission and that
margins
are generally pretty minimal. But there's still, for example, we became quite well known for our lowest airfares guarantee. Well, it used to be lowest airfares guaranteed, and we had to switch it to lowest airfare guarantee. And I'm actually trying to convince our guys that we need to bring something like this back as a start, because obviously we tend to make money out of add-on products, not so much about air. But when you have a brand like Flight Centre, air is obviously, flights are really important, and people need to know that you are competitive in pricing, and certainly no more expensive than airlines and that. So that's almost back to the beginning, if you like. So there's still plenty of opportunity, and I know that particularly with Flight Centre, the guys there do, if they've got a difficult problem or a marketing thing that they want to run, they often run it past me, and not always happy with the answer.
All right, so you mentioned before when I asked you about like would you do anything differently if you started Flight Centre in 2026, you spoke about kind of specialising potentially and niches, and I'm interested in exploring this a little bit, because certainly what we're seeing on TripAdvisor is this significant trend towards experiential travel, and it's actually a shift in people's motivations for travel. I think deep down, it's about building a trip around experiences and passion points. It's not so much now about picking a destination and then deciding what you're going to do once you're there. It's like working out the types of things you want to do and then kind of finding a destination that can kind of deliver that for you. So we're seeing passion points like food and wellness and, events like going to the Grand Prix in Singapore and building a trip around that. So do you see this, I'm interested in your perspective, do you see this as kind of a short-term trend, something that will probably fade out, or do you see this as kind of more of a long-term trend that's going to impact the way people travel in the longer term? And how is, depending on how you answer that, how is that kind of influencing the way you go to market in your company?
Yeah, I think what you say is totally correct. And, we have a brand like Flight Centre, which you'd say it's basically a mass generalist type of travel brand. It's not only flights, obviously, because you couldn't make enough money out of flights only, but it is a generalist brand where people who are going on a trip, they've got probably a good idea or a vague idea what they want to do, and it may involve some experiences, some different things. But I think you're right that those people, we've just had a booking in the UK. It was $1.3 million, Australian dollars, for a family of 10 to go to Africa.
Wow.
And quite a good margin on that. But that is a trip that's built up by our African expert in London over a period of time. And there are quite a big market, people with significant amounts of money who do want special experiences like that. And obviously we're quite happy to help them, but they're not going to go to a Flight Centre to build up that sort of trip. They're going to go to a really specialised person. And I think there's going to be a big demand for that specialist experiences, whether it's luxury or whatever sort of experiences it is. And it's a travel industry, we do need to adapt to that. And, we certainly have to a reasonable extent but mainly buying in specialities that we just don't have the capacity to do. And quite often it doesn't need to be a huge organisation. Some of the, for example, with our package holiday, we do this My Holidays, My Cruises, and we bought that, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. It was quite a small company. Now it's doing $1 billion a year in sales and 30 or 40 million in profit. Don't tell the former owners of that, but
I'm sure they're not watching.
No, they do know. They would know, but. So it is, and that's a reasonably specialist area. The cruising as well. We this next year we'll do $2 billion in cruising. A few years ago we would have done maybe 100 million max. So, and that's partly through growth, organic growth, but also through acquisition.
Again, do you feel like it's a trend, or do you feel like it's something that's kind of here to stay? Because what I'm interested in is like, what has led to this. And everyone has their own theories. Some say people going through COVID and just that experience of being locked down and so forth has kind of changed people's perspectives on the importance of travel and the meaning of travel and making sure that they get, something quite unique out of it. Other people say it's the rising middle class and etc. Do you feel like it is something that's here for the long term?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, and let's look at the Australian market, and we were probably part of that. Yeah, we were looking for different new experiences and a bit of adventure without necessarily putting our lives at risk. And I think it's not that much different probably, except that you're getting the people in their 60s and 70s who are retiring. A lot of them are reasonably well off, and they want these different experiences now. And most of us have had quite a bit of travel over the decades. So these new things and doing things that you really you like and you want to do, that's probably what, going and lying on a beach in Hawaii or something like that is probably, I mean, I'm sure there's some people who like doing that, but it's probably for people who've had a lot of travel experience over the years, it's the more specialised areas, the more experiential things probably is where it's going to head. And as I say, what was in the 60s and 70s, particularly for people of our generation, it's probably just a different mode in this new. But people do want things that are different.
Yeah. I mean, as part of that, what we're also seeing, and again, I'd be interested to see whether you're seeing something similar, is this desire or rising popularity for kind of secondary destinations and hidden gems. So, yes, people are still going to Japan and they're still going to Tokyo, they're still going to Osaka, they're still going to Kyoto, but they're also looking to add to their trip and go and visit places like Nara or Hiroshima. And you can pick any country, and typically what we're seeing based on our data is, these secondary destinations are kind of growing. So again, it feeds into this whole, I want a meaningful experience. I mean, there's also people that probably are sustainable tourism is important to them. So, they are looking to not necessarily to go to these places where there's over tourism. Are you seeing anything in any of your data that suggests that, there is more of an appetite for these secondary destinations?
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, you just listen to some of the cruise destinations, and Japan is one of those, and Dubrovnik and Venice, where and parts of Norway, I believe too, where that so-called over-tourism. And I think a lot of people, particularly Australians who travel quite a lot, they've probably been to a lot of the more touristy destinations and do want different experiences, out of the way places, and don't want to be absolutely inundated with where there's just hundreds of thousands of tourists, just as the locals are not that happy about it. But in the end, if you look at the generation prior to our generation, obviously I'm a baby boomer, which I think they're called frugals, which my parents would have fitted right into it. But they generally travel quite a lot differently to what we have done, or our generation. And the baby boomers now, particularly the younger baby boomers, are big travellers, and they're often retired and they've got money. My parents' generation, probably your grandparents, they're just getting over the war, and travelling was a luxury. Yeah, international travel was a luxury. Yeah, and not only a luxury, they were building up, for their finances for the family and home and other things that obviously the war interrupted a lot. So I think that's also what's changed. We have the luxury now of being a generation that can retire most with reasonable whether it's superannuation or assets, and so things are different now.
Yeah. It's kind of more conducive to being able to travel, which is great. Like even when I was working at Virgin, we used to hear about Flight Centre and great culture. I think there was people, Darren Wright, who I used to work with at Virgin, works at Flight Centre and has for a long time. But you've kind of always been quite famous, certainly within the circles that I'm in, as being one of those, having a culture that really does fit that work hard, play hard kind of mentality. Can you talk to us a little bit about the culture? Because I was also listening to something the other day which was fascinating. It's about essentially applying evolutionary psychology to corporate culture, where you talk about take people from the Stone Age, but you can't take the Stone Age out of the people. Can you maybe just articulate a little bit about the culture that you've created at Flight Centre that you've been really focused on?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has come about fairly accidentally. We certainly believe, and it's more or less the family, village, tribe, and probably the family, which is team-based. And we're very focused on making sure everyone's in a team. A lot of us now, because we're more globalised, are in two teams. You might have a global team as well as a team you actually sit with. But that is really important. And it's, as I said, business shouldn't be, or hopefully isn't, life and death, whereas a war is, what's happening in Iran or in Ukraine, that's life and death. Whereas business, it's serious, but it should be fun. And we put actually we have Virgin in our building now, of course, but they're not allowed to drink during the daytime apparently.
Oh, is that right?
No, well, it's an airline, but we don't have, and we have our annual global gathering, but that's just part of it. And there's generally 2,000 or 3,000 people. We're in LA this year, and it's mainly a sales, reward, if you like. But also the longevity of a lot of our people means that people know each other very well, particularly at a more senior level. We obviously still have new people coming in all the time at the shop and frontline level, but it's. And there are some people who personify, I suppose, we have a character called Joel Ogilvy. I think she's approaching 40 years. You don't know her, Joel?
I think I've read it somewhere.
Well, anyway, she, and we have to occasionally talk to her about toning it down a little bit, or we'll get into trouble. But we have had that, and I think it came originally from that a lot of our people came from Top Deck, and Top Deck tours were always, meant to be fun, and that was every courier and driver had a questionnaire they had to fill in, and they'd get, I think, £5 a week bonus if they got over 15 out of 20 or something like that.
Right.
And a lot of the people came in from there into Flight Centre, and so that culture of having fun, working hard and playing hard was part of it. And it's hard to describe it in a short time, but it is a really important part of any organisation, I think. And I think, and I know Brett Godfrey reasonably well, and I know, when he started Virgin, I think they certainly had obviously it's a new airline. You don't establish a culture overnight, but I think they had quite a good culture from what we saw anyway from the outside.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a credit to you and the leadership team that everyone that I know that either has or even is still working at Flight Centre, has nothing but great words to say about the company, the culture, the values, and just the experience of working there. So that's a good thing. Lastly, what role do platforms like TripAdvisor play in the modern path to purchase? I'm
not a big social media user at all, so I won't have any trouble at the US border. But so I don't use a lot, but I think platforms like TripAdvisor, and I was asking a few people about this. It is obviously considered a really important service that people do use, and I know a lot of our people that I was talking to do use it a lot, and to get what they want, what advice and experiences and other things that is put to them through TripAdvisor. So,
but yeah, I think it comes back to that. Like we were talking about that kind of human ability to have human feedback, whilst they certainly can get that from a live human via Flight Centre. On TripAdvisor, they've got a resource of, human experiences documented. Look, I am conscious of your time. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation and appreciate you taking the time. So
thanks,
Skroo.
Scott.
Thanks.
Nice talking to you.
Thanks,
you.
mate. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Travel Chapters with TripAdvisor. Travel is always changing, and every story helps us understand the world a little differently. Open up horizons you may not have considered. To explore more insights, trends, and destination knowledge, visit TripAdvisor or follow along on our social channels. See you in the next chapter.